Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us on today's Tourism Clinic. As always, we're discussing international issues, global issues that affect our business, and ways we are contributing today. And as always, we have in the live session today our consultant, Matea. We're discussing a very interesting topic, reducing over tourism, and we're taking lessons from people that have tried to reduce over tourism and how they've done it. And perhaps we can find that applicable to us, to our businesses and our destinations. Please.
Yes, thank you very much, Esther. First of all, for having me in your studio, Tourism Clinic, that we are delivering every Monday at 5 p.m. Central European Time. By the way, this is my time because I come from Slovenia, a little tiny country between Italy, Austria, Hungary, Croatia, and also Adriatic Sea. And we are opening always these, let's say, more painful topics of our tourism. And one of those ones, really, I would say, pretty unpleasant, is
Mm,
the topic how to balance between the travel industry and also the business, right? Because business, of course, has to be profitable. But on the
mm,
other hand, we notice that lately tourism is sometimes also interfering the life of locals too much. So it's always a question how to balance that. And I would like to present few, let's say, few starting points to discuss, and later on, I'm sure that our viewers and followers will have some questions or maybe even comments. So I'm very happy, Esther, that you are with us and you can share them with us during this session or maybe later on. We are in contact all the time anyway. So the major question is how to find this balance, right? How to overcome the issues of over tourism, and nowadays we call it even like unbalanced tourism, so the tourism that put out of the center also the lives in the destination or at the destination. Definitely all the topics that we already covered, right? So that means that we definitely need to promote sustainable tourism, right? I think we mentioned already many times. So those ones who are interested in that, they maybe just should see the replays of our previous sessions. Another topic which I don't think we covered so much, but it's definitely to implement visitors caps and times entry. So, in our area, I have to tell you that visitors are not anymore surprised if we say, unfortunately, the number of visitors in that part is already too high. So, at this moment, we don't want anyone else to enter, let's say, the national park or the gorge or a site, right? So, it's always like a certain number, which is, I would say, a max number, and more visitors cannot come. For example, the Pompeii in Italy, of course, one of the major attractions in Italy. And of course, there is a capacity of this site. And then when they say enough visitors, then we need to wait for the next part that some of them will get out. And that's why we have also timed entry. So that means when you buy the ticket, and usually now this is all online, right? You already choose the time when you are going to enter, and then the destination or the site knows how many people they have at one time at certain period uh, on the site, or even in museum. For example, if you go to some museums, favorite ones, well-known ones, you have a time set, and then you need to book a proper time, no? Another thing is very important for these destinations that we invest in the infrastructure. So that means that the logistics, right, of the infrastructure will allow also these kind of regulations. So if we get something from tourism, right, we need to invest back so that this tourism will flow according to the number of visitors that are coming, and of course not disturbing also the local population, or even disturbing the site, because unbalanced tourism also causes the damage of the sites, or let's say natural or cultural. It doesn't matter, also in the nature, and when there are too many people, it's not good. Another topic that we opened few weeks ago was also education of tourists, and I think this is a very important role. So when people are traveling around, that they also educate themselves, so that we raise the awareness when we do a certain interpretation, that we tell them, for the let's say a successful balanced tourism, we need to respect the locals. So that's why we are going to walk mainly on the right hand side. For example, I had today two groups, right? And I asked them to stay on the side so they don't disturb also the locals who are passing by, going to work, taking children from kindergarten schools and bringing them to different activities. So we definitely need to raise the awareness among the tourists that the locals live also from other activities, not only tourism. So not all of them are in favor of tourism. And in fact, I have to tell you, last week we had the representation or presentation of our colleague from Amsterdam. And she said that nowadays it's not nice to be a tourist guide, because nowadays uh, tourists and also tourist guides with groups, they are considered as a kind of an invaders or intruders, right? Before, let's say 10, 15 years ago, everybody was welcome. Wow, thank you very much, you brought the group, you brought visitors and so on. Nowadays the situation has changed. So if we want to have this peaceful flow of tourism, we definitely need to educate visitors as well, huh? Empower local communities. So that means that we need to raise the awareness among the locals, what tourism brings to our community, and then also, let's say, how they can contribute to this easy flow of tourism, so that we have a respect on both sides, on the side of tourists and on the side of the locals. And then, of course, since the situation is changing all the time, we need to modernize, to monitor that, and of course, then also adjust. For example, a few years ago, the time before Easter in our area, let's say European part, the northern hemisphere, it was always considered as a low season. But the times have changed, so we have more and more visitors. Also, let's say in so-called off season, because we invited them to come in the period when there was not so many visitors, right? So we definitely need to see how these groups of visitors are moving around our sites in the nature, or around cultural sites through the cities, and then we need to adjust the policy. Well, sorry about that. It looks that the title is too big, right? But I hope that you can read that we definitely need to preserve these destinations. But on the other hand, of course, local community or local businesses needs to be sustainable. That means prosper. That means that they need to have also a proper income in order to stay in the long run in the area. So we are now talking about the holistic planning and the regulation, right? So that the destination management, which is in fact plays the major role, right? They should consider the environmental, the cultural, social, and economical impacts of tourism. So zoning, for example, our colleague from Amsterdam just mentioned that they have the inner zone of the old part of the city, and in some parts in that inner zone, group visitors are not allowed anymore, right? Because when we enter with a group, of course, we block all these narrow streets. And Amsterdam simply decided that in this narrow zone, right in the core, visitors coming as groups are not allowed anymore. So only individuals. So if you are a guide and you have let's say two, three, four, five, six visitors, that's okay, but bigger groups not anymore. Nah? Then we set time caps, right? That's very important. In the city, of course, that's a bit different, right? Because it's more like open space. But if we have the site, like a natural site, when we have the entrance and the exit, of course, then we can set also the caps. Nah? And then, of course, that we flow these visitors controls, that we control this flow. Of course, sometimes we think, okay, what about if visitors stay longer? But I think that the destination management already knows, because of the observations and so on, of course, how long the visitor stays, so that they can, um, let's say, set the general or average time when the visitor will leave the protected area, no? Because some of the areas are really very fragile, no? And this, this is something, Esther, that needs to involve all the stakeholders. I think this is, on one side, the advantage of tourism, right? Because we all stakeholders need to work as a team, right? So together everyone achieves more, we say team. Nah? But on the other hand, of course, that also means that if I decided on, let's say, on a certain decision, if I will not communicate it with my partners, with my stakeholders, most probably it will not be successful. So this is, on one side, is a positive part, right? Because we discuss, we communicate, but since sometimes it's difficult to discuss, that can be also quite a challenge. And it's not only like partners on the same level, but of course it's also the communities, right? The governments, sometimes also how to implement the laws. For example, the law of tourism, the law of environmental protection, the cultural heritage. And there are also certain non-government organizations. Sometimes, of course, they are pretty strict, because that's also the task of the non-government organizations, that they protect, right? But on the other hand, when we are planning this tourism flow, we need to find sooner or later, let's say, the same language. No? Uh, so definitely supporting local economy. I will not talk much about it because we had topics also in the previous weeks about that. So authentic local products and experiences, and they are also for sure contributing to this, let's say, balanced tourism, because the more locals are involved, in tourism industry, the more they will support also tourism itself. Of course, it needs to be regulated how it is moving, in which direction, but the more local businesses are involved, the better the communication, because every party has more interest. Of course, if you see that the income from the tourism is going abroad, right, then the locals will not like tourism. But if they see that that stays in the local community, that everybody has a better life, that is going to be for sure a different response. No? Embracing the sustainability. The other day we had questions and answers, right? And there was a question about these certifications. Some of our followers mentioned how expensive these certifications are, but you know what, if we are going to include these, let's say, sustainable, eco-conscious terms in our promotion, and if we are going to implement that also in our everyday working routine, I think in a long run, we are going to be on a positive side, so that the balance will be more towards, let's say, our income. So it doesn't need to be investment in their certification. It's already our will, our determination, our strategy towards that green innovations, and of course, community benefits, so that we market that, right? And here is Esther, and here is you with your services, because you can do that excellently. You can help also little businesses without even, let's say, having all these expensive certification. Of course, later on, when the business is growing, when it's going more profitable, then we can grab also one of these certificates that are maybe the most suitable for us. No? Today, I think it's really awesome because technology can help us really a lot. So that we should monitor that, helping us with the data of the statistics, for example. Maybe there are also some interviews on the field, but definitely we need to monitor the visitors number and, of course, also their feedback. For example, once I remember there was a survey, and the traveler said, "Oh, you know what? We thought that this is like off the beaten path area, and it is so crowded." So that means that it is, even though maybe the place is not so well known, that doesn't mean that other visitors will not come, because it depends where you are unknown, right? It depends from which market you come. So, but what I wanted to say is that we always need to analyze these feedbacks from the travelers, and we need to take a responsible action immediately. So, not to wait like for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, but we need to act immediately. Of course, also the environmental impact, right? The nature always pays a price. So, we always need to act really immediately, I would like to say. Then dynamic pricing. A lot of times, now some portals are already suggesting like dynamic pricing. And that means that if there is a higher demand, right, we put a higher price. So if everybody, let's say, wants to have a tour in the morning, this time it is maybe more pricey, right? A higher price. But if there is nobody who wants to do the tour in the afternoon, then we can make an afternoon tour a bit more affordable. So still everybody can have, but on the other hand, let's say that in the period when it's let's say a bigger demand, then of course also the price is slightly higher, and maybe we can then detour our visitors uh, quicker. No? QR code trails, I think this is very much in nowadays. I'm not so sure if we are using these QR codes enough as it is offered. So let's open our minds, I would say. And then also these real-time crowd management. So if something happens, right, immediately we haven't expected so many, let's say, day visitors in the city, right, that can happen, so that we act on the spot. Of course, here I would say that we locals as tourist guides, we have a better advantage, because if we see that there is a spot that it's very crowded, we are local experts, so we can take our group through maybe a next street, another path, which we know very well, right? And we avoid those crowds, because believe it or not, people don't enjoy in the crowd, right? Because they don't have enough opportunity to take pictures. Maybe they don't hear us. And it's also important that the areas when we take them out of the crowd are safer, like pickpockets. In all these crowded places, this is a pickpocket's paradise. So when I say to my visitors, let's go around the corner, we are going to enjoy more, it's going to be more quiet, you're going to get a better local experience, I think everybody appreciates that very much, right? So we don't need to be where everybody is. Nah? And these kind of smart itineraries, I think, are very, very practical. Educating, engaging visitors. I think we already mentioned that. So it's very important that we explain them on their question why. Why so? Why have we done this? What have we done that? That we always find a reasonable answer that we explain to them. And once it is explained, I think it's really appreciated appreciated from the visitors, right? So I always say that we need to sell this sustainability. The other day we had a training for tourist guides not far away from here where I live, and I said to the future tourist guides, I said, you know what? The best tourist guides are those ones who are coming from the selling departments. Let's say that somebody would like to shift the industry, right? Because, they know how to sell. And here we are selling the sustainability. So always present to the visitors why this is good for them. uh, And these are special skills, of course, that are much appreciated for tour operators, so that you choose the right wording why you are doing something, what you are actually doing. Nah? And that means that we need to invest in training and upskilling. So I mentioned now like the skills of selling. So we are not selling the product, right? But we are selling the ideas, we are selling the sustainability, we are selling the balanced tourism, we are selling the friendliness, we are selling the positive parts, segments of tourism. And for this, you need to have skills as well. So this is something that I think we should do more and more. So upskilling us stakeholders. Nah? So it is fine, of course, to know more about, I don't know, the heritage, a core knowledge, as we say, or a history. But on the other side, we need to improve our skills as well. Because if we are going to do that, then will be more jobs. And of course, then we will also be able to retain the talent in the sector. What is, in fact, quite difficult, especially after COVID time, because a lot of our excellent colleagues have found maybe more stable jobs somewhere else, right? So, not so many people now on the market, let's say. So we definitely need to focus on quality. So not the quantity, but the quality. Okay, this is definitely the right approach. So quality over quantity. So that means the local satisfaction, ecological health, cultural vitality, and of course also the economic equality. Well, of course, there are some best practices. Somehow I already mentioned, like the Amsterdam, how it was overcrowded and noise and raising rentals and so on. And of course, they decided to discourage a mass tourism in the city center. Remember, that's what I mentioned. So it's more individuals and so on. And then, of course, they had some limitations on the cruise ships. And of course, their motto is now enjoy. So have fun, enjoy, and yet respect the local community. And it has already some results. It doesn't mean that, it always has a positive result immediately, but I think in a low run for sure. No? In Iceland, for example, it's unbelievable high number of visitors, and they are all going there for the nature, for the northern lights, and so on. And this is something that for this little country it was too much. And then they actually started the promotion inspired by Iceland. And that means that they focused on education of tourism behavior, and they also spread the visitors throughout of the country and especially throughout of the season. And I think this is most important, right? So that also the seasons. Then another one is Cinque Terre in Italy. These romantic scenes from the films, everybody wanted to see that. These are small villages and narrow streets. There is a cruise ship that it's coming, so immediately a lot of people. But on the other hand, they introduced then the daily tourist caps. So that means that they more welcome the visitors who are staying longer, right? Then they prefer that visitors come with it by train, not by car, because there are not enough parking places. Again, off season, you see that's everywhere, right? Then they have a special reservation system, and somehow they say that it's working. Of course, it's still very busy, but we are trying our best. Then we have, for example, Kyoto, that lost the cultural authenticity in overcrowding in these heritage sites, and that's why they implemented the visitor code of conduct. Can you see? So also the visitor code of conduct. So not only for us stakeholders, but also for the visitor. Smartphone apps, so they are using this digitalization, or let's say technology in tourism. In New Zealand, I think that everybody knows that New Zealand is very, very well known for the gorgeous environment, and the pressure was just too much. So they launched this a nationwide visitor pledge to care for the environment and the communities. And then, of course, they also investigated. Uh, for example, the situation and also the freedom of camping permits that was changed. And I think it's great. And what they focused is on slow tourism and mindful travel. Then we have Barcelona, everybody knows, overcrowded. So they definitely set the smaller size of the group. Then they also use the sensors and mobile data so that they tracked where these groups are moving. And of course, they are redirecting visitors to lesser known districts. Singapore, you know that this is a small island, right? But they are so let's say advanced with this digitalization that they integrated the digital tourism strategies. So they developed a central digital platform. Yeah. Then we have Sweden, digital trail maps and visitor caps, and of course also sustainable partnership they opened. And I think this is very important for the businesses so that everybody knows what to expect. And then of course you can plan also your business according to that. Again, another city in Japan, this is Nikko, and then they implemented the smart mobility and multilingual information. So that means that everybody can say, oh, the information it's in my language, so they inform me about that and that. And that's how you are more approachable to the visitors. And once you are more approachable to the visitor, you remember the last time we talked about it, of course then they follow your suggestion much, much better. No? Nice in France, of course, Côte d'Azur, everybody wants to be down there. And they introduced so called smart kiosks, public Wi Fi, and real time visitors assistance. So that means that they can follow them much better. So they offer the Wi Fi, and that's how they can follow the crowds much better. No? I come from Ljubljana, right, Slovenia, and we have a very I would say green philosophy of development of the city and also as a tourist destination. And we were in 2016 presented as a green capital of Europe. We have a car-free city center, so this is something that visitors really like it. Of course, since there are more groups, there are still some challenges like locals going by bicycle to work, and then we have these I don't know, more groups that are taking pictures, so we can still have, let's say, so unpleasant situations, but let's say that we are going in the right path. Since the great part of the city is a car-free zone, we have so-called cavaliers. This is a little shuttle electric car, and we offer free rides for those ones who cannot communicate, let's say, from one part of the car-free zone to the another one. Then we have bike sharing programs. That means if you don't have a bicycle, you can rent it there. And, there are some improvements, cleaner air, less noise. I think that's very nice. And then, of course, more walkable charm. Everybody likes it very much because you can enjoy better. We focus also on circular economy. No? and it has one of the highest recycling rates in EU. So I think that's very important because when you have more tourism, you have also more waste, right? And then we promote farmers markets, so more local seasonal food, and that just means that when visitors go to the local restaurants, they are asking for more local dishes, and that means that that's good also for the local community because everybody is earning more, nah? Digital tools, of course. This is one of the most affordable, I would say, tools. And we would really like to take visitors of the beaten path areas. And for example, I have also some tours that I take out of the city center. It's still walking, but you can already get a completely different impression of Ljubljana. And I think visitors like it very much. The only thing is the question how much time visitors have in our area. No? If you have only one day, of course, then you stay mostly in the city center. Community engagement, so that as much as possible, we locals are engaged. And then also promotion of the responsible behavior. The other day, remember, I had a presentation on carbon neutral society, and we talked about how the city supports our guided tours, that we also promote this responsible behavior. Nah? So definitely, we would like that this city is more smart and sustainable, even though we are not a big city, like just 300,000 people. But the city center, it's very compact, and that's why sometimes we can already notice a bit of these unbalances that happen when the visitors come, especially with groups. Nah? So let's just wrap up, right? What makes smart tourism work also for the businesses? Nah? Data driven decision making. So you remember those caps that we mentioned, nah? That we close the certain areas for a higher number, but the businesses still know how many visitors will come and they offer their service when the number of the visitors is, let's say, reported. Nah? So then also for the staff, for the, I don't know, in the restaurant, how much products you need to buy because approximately how much you will sell and so on. So definitely technology as much as possible because that helps us a lot. Nah? And then as much as possible community involvement, and that we all then share the benefits, so that we say that if there is a tourism positive part, that this is also positive for the locals, nah? And not that it's overwhelmed. And definitely again the education of visitors and also all the stakeholders. So, Esther, I was slightly longer today, but I hope you don't mind because, this is such an important topic. And I think it's really important that we point it out, even though about some topics we talked already previous weeks. But I think we need to be sustainable also in business, right? We need to earn something for our living. So finding a balance, it's quite a challenge.
Mm. I mean, I totally agree with you. Yes, I mean, with time, we're far in, but I think I definitely love the concept of destinations, putting a cap on tourist visiting. Honestly, I think that the more I think about it, that's actually how to have what we call balanced tourism. You just have to say, okay, people can come in at this specific time of the year, and when they come in, these are specific tours that they can do, these are specific activities that they can get access to. I
Yeah.
believe that, if everybody understands that all we're just doing
Mm,
is we're making the earth better, greener, and fairer, and because there's
mm,
something that's ahead, I mean, with climate change, lots of things
yeah.
that has been said, then we become like conscious of that, and you wouldn't really be annoyed at anyone for saying, you know what, you can visit at this
Mm.
time.
Sure, sure, sure. And visitors are more and more aware of that. So it's not going to be unusual. They are going to understand that.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We might not be able to take questions today, but just like we did last week, I'm going to start working on us just having like this Q&A session every once
Yes,
a month where we can just review everything that we've spoken about, and then we'd answer every question sent to us. Thank you
sure,
so much.
gladly. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I wish you all a very, very pleasant April. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye.